The term utopia is quite prevalent these days. Originally, it was used to denote perfection, completeness, something worthy only of dreams and desires. Gradually, it came to signify the impossible and unattainable. The expression was first used in the title of the book of the same name, published by philosopher Thomas More in 1516. The work narrates the story of a seemingly perfect fictional society. Although the term was first used in the Middle Ages, the concept is much older, with examples even in ancient Greece, such as Plato's Republic. Like in the medieval work, the Greek philosopher attempted to depict what a perfect society guided by reason would look like, but ultimately failed in the endeavor. Especially after the 1950s, the concept of dystopia became popular, particularly after the release of George Orwell's 1984. This term, as the name suggests, opposes utopia, describing catastrophic future scenarios. Unlike the former case, these are alarmingly possible. The case we will present to you today occurred around that time. It's not a fictional literary work, but an experiment that illustrated this transition from utopia to dystopia. Despite being conducted on rats, it was associated with human civilizations and served as a warning for us to be careful. Otherwise, we will have to deal with the devastating consequences of a possible extinction of humanity. It all began in 1947 when the rapid increase in population density in the United States started to concern various experts. Advances in medicine, public policies, and working conditions contributed to a significant reduction in infant mortality and an increase in life expectancy. As a result, the population, especially in major cities, began to grow rapidly, along with concerns about the use of natural resources. Speculation arose in various fields about the future impacts on humanity. It was then that American ethologist John B. Calhoun devised an experiment to analyze the consequences of overpopulation in a rat colony. Ethology, the branch of science that studies animal behavior, was Calhoun's field, and his intention was to extrapolate the results to human societies. The experiment began on a farm, a space provided by the scientist's neighbor. Calhoun erected a fence around approximately 1,000 square meters near a small forest on the property. According to the researchers' estimates, the space would be sufficient to accommodate up to 5,000 animals and was dubbed the Rat City. John introduced 5 pregnant rats into the enclosure and began observations. However, there was a surprise. Over 2 years of experimentation, the animal population never exceeded 200 individuals. The expectation was that the city would house at least 1,000 subjects. Intrigued, the researcher repeated the experiment 23 more times, always achieving very similar results. He attributed this phenomenon to the fact that the animals were exposed to natural conditions such as predators, diseases, weather conditions, and other inherent nature features that usually contribute to population control and ecosystem balance. Thus, John decided to repeat the experiment once more, the 25th attempt, which became known as Universe 25, or, as we will see later, Rat Utopia. The biggest obstacle faced in his research was the incidence of random causes. Calhoun chose to conduct it in a completely controlled environment where nothing or very little could interfere with the results. Around 1954, he was already working in the psychology laboratory of the National Institute of Mental Health, which was chosen to conduct the next attempt. John constructed a tank with an area of approximately 3 square meters, with walls 1.5 meters high and a constant temperature of 20 degrees Celsius, considered ideal. Additionally, to ensure that there were no disputes, competitions, concerns, or stress that could interfere with the behavior of the animals, the scientist equipped the device with everything the rats would need: shelter, water, food, nesting material, all provided abundantly and freely. Hence, the project was dubbed Rat Utopia, because everything necessary would be available to them, much like a utopia envisioned by humans. The central goal of the investigation was still the social impact of overpopulation, but this almost changed because such a scenario could never be achieved by animals in nature. Thus, we could say that he was also measuring the effects of a ratopia on society. However, this was certainly not intentional, as I'm almost certain that such a term doesn't even exist. While in the tank, there were 256 shelters capable of accommodating several animals. Additionally, there were daily partitions, something put in place to facilitate measurements, but the rats could move freely throughout the space. The area also had the equipment responsible for dispensing food and water, all available freely without the need for rationing or competition. The experiment began with 8 healthy animals, 4 pairs of males and females. This initial stage was described by the researcher as a structuring phase or a period of struggle and lasted approximately 104 days. During this time, the rodents adjusted to the habitat and built their nests. In the next phase, described as exploration, the pairs met, mated, and began reproducing. Here, a population explosion could be observed, as the number of individuals doubled roughly every 55 days. According to the scientists' calculations, the maximum number of animals the shelter could support was about 2,200 rats. From this point, overpopulation would begin to cause its effects, such as space and resource competition. This was exactly what he expected to measure, but it didn't quite happen that way. By day 315, Rat Utopia already housed roughly 620 animals. Calhoun began to observe some social stratifications. Dominant males developed aggressive behaviors, attacking others seemingly without reason and even engaging in cannibalism, despite there being sufficient food for all. On the other hand, omega rats at the bottom of the hierarchy became timid and ceased mating when rejected by females. Since they no longer had a relevant social role, they distanced themselves from the group, living marginalized lives, spending most of their time eating and sleeping to avoid conflicts with others. Meanwhile, females became overwhelmed with caring for nests and offspring, also developing aggressive behaviors initially directed towards other adult animals but eventually transferred to the offspring. Often, they even abandoned the young, resulting in an almost 90% mortality rate among the youngest rats. All of this, combined with decreased mating, severely impacted population growth, leading to the onset of the stagnation phase. By day 560 of the experiment, the rats lost their ability to act as such and were no longer guided by instinct. Their functions no longer resembled those observed in nature, with fights becoming increasingly frequent. Those born in this phase had no parameters to follow and grew up with severe mental disorders. At one point, the mortality rate among the offspring reached 100%, indicating no further population growth, only the decline of those remaining. Thus, we entered the death phase. This generation, born and raised in an abnormal environment without parameters, only ate, drank, and groomed themselves. They were dubbed the beautiful ones by the scientist, with their main characteristics being social apathy, loss of purpose, and seclusion, as they preferred to be alone and avoid contact with other animals. As we can imagine, a society cannot develop in this way, and shortly afterward, all the rats died, leading to the extinction of the Rat Utopia population. An article containing the experiment's results was published by John Calhoun in Scientific American in 1962. The scientists concluded that rats, like humans, only thrive when they have a well-established sense of identity and purpose. Thus, the world without stress, anxiety, or reasons to strive for does not activate our survival instinct, leading to chaos and ultimately extinction. Such publications usually reach the scientific community first, which is natural, but when they reach the general public, the results described by John caused quite a stir. Many criticized his conclusions. After all, rats share certain similarities with humans, especially in brain chemistry, making them frequently used as test subjects in experiments. However, human social behavior is inherent to our species, whether due to our evolutionary process, biology, or our connection with a divine being, so it wouldn't be as simple to extrapolate the experiment's results. Nevertheless, the consequences of population growth, coupled with climate change, do pose a potential threat to humanity and should be treated seriously, a topic that requires efforts from international authorities. Furthermore, we'll likely never have the chance to analyze the effects of a utopia in our society as they are inherently unattainable. However, if we take examples from literature and other fictional works, perhaps it's better to struggle with the day-to-day difficulties. Well, I'll leave it at that for now. Until next time, goodbye.